waiting armored black SUV. Chloe finally found her voice. "You didn't have to do that," she breathed, shivering slightly as the adrenaline began to wear off. Matteo removed his bespoke suit jacket and draped it gently over her shoulders. It smelled heavily of expensive cologne and danger. "I disagree." He needed to be reminded of his place at the bottom of the food chain. "Is that it, then?" Chloe asked, looking up at his sharp profile. "You scared him." "He's terrified." Matteo paused with his hand on the door of the SUV. He looked down at her, a slow, dark smile spreading across his lips. It was a smile that promised absolute ruin. "Scared him?" Matteo chuckled darkly. "Oh, sweet Chloe." That was just the introduction. Bradley Hayes manages the offshore accounts for the O'Connor family. Tomorrow morning, I am going to freeze his assets. By noon, his firm will be investigated by the feds. By Friday, he won't have a penny to his name, and his dangerous clients will be looking for his head. Chloe stared at him, her heart stopping. "You're going to destroy his entire life." Matteo reached out, his thumb gently tracing the soft curve of her jawline. "I told you, Maya, Bella, I'm going to burn his world to the ground, because nobody makes my woman cry." Sunrise over Lake Michigan brought no warmth to Bradley Hayes. He arrived at the towering glass facade of Harrison and Reed Wealth Management on Wacker Drive at exactly 6 in, his designer shirt already sticking to his back with cold sweat. He had spent the entire night frantically calling his offshore contacts in the Cayman Islands, trying to move the O'Connor family's hidden millions before Matteo Vitiello could strike. Every single call had gone straight to a disconnected tone. He swiped his platinum keycard at the executive elevator bank. The reader flashed an angry, solid red. "Access denied." "Hey, what the hell?" Bradley muttered, slamming his palm against the scanner. "Mr. Butwell Hayes," a voice echoed through the marble lobby. Bradley spun around to find 2 men in standard-issue FBI windbreakers, flanked by building security. Behind them, through the revolving glass doors, 3 black tactical vans were parked haphazardly on the curb. Agents were streaming into the lobby carrying empty cardboard boxes. "We have a federal warrant for your office, your personal hard drives, and all physical ledgers," the lead agent said, holding up a thick stack of paperwork. "Your accounts have been frozen pending a massive federal indictment regarding wire fraud and money laundering." Bradley's knees buckled. "On what grounds?" "This is a mistake. I manage legitimate portfolios." "We received an anonymous data dump at 3 this morning," the agent replied, his face completely devoid of sympathy. "It contained 10 years of encrypted transaction logs detailing your exact funneling methods for the Irish syndicate. You're ruined, Hayes. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." As the cold steel of handcuffs snapped around his wrists, Bradley's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. The agent fished it out, glancing at the caller ID. "It says Liam O'Connor," the agent noted dryly. "Should I tell him his money is currently property of the United States Treasury?" Bradley let out a pathetic, strangled sob. The O'Connors were not men who accepted apologies or federal seizures. They were brutal, old-school enforcers who preferred to settle debts with crowbars in shipping containers. Matteo hadn't just taken his job. He had painted a massive, bloody target on his back. By noon, Bradley's picture was plastered across every local news network. He was out on bail, paid for by scraping together the last of his legitimate savings. But he had nowhere to go. When he arrived at his luxury Gold Coast condo, he found Jessica hauling 3 designer suitcases into the back of a waiting Uber. "Jess, wait," Bradley pleaded, running up the driveway. "I can fix this. It's a misunderstanding." Jessica didn't even look at him. She slid on her oversized sunglasses, her mouth pressed into a thin, disgusted line. Your accounts are locked, Bradley. My platinum card declined at the coffee shop this morning. I'm not going to be the girlfriend of a broke felon who has the Irish mob hunting him down. Do not contact me again. The Uber sped off, leaving Bradley standing alone in the driveway, completely and utterly shattered. In less than 12 hours, Matteo Vitiello had kept his promise. Across the city in Lincoln Park, Chloe Henderson sat cross-legged on her velvet sofa, watching the afternoon news broadcast with wide, disbelieving eyes. The chyron across the bottom of the screen read, "Chicago Wefmanager, indicted in massive mob sweep." She turned off the television, her hands trembling. Matteo hadn't been exaggerating. He possessed a terrifying, godlike power over the city, and he had unleashed it all because of a few cruel words spoken in a dark library. A sharp knock at her door pulled her from her racing thoughts. Chloe cautiously opened the door to find a massive matte black clothing box resting on her welcome mat, tied with a heavy silk ribbon. There was no delivery driver in sight. She dragged the box inside and carefully untied the ribbon. Pushing back the layers of dark tissue paper, she gasped. Inside was a dress. It wasn't just any dress, it was a custom-tailored masterpiece of deep ruby red velvet. Unlike the garments she usually bought, which were designed to compress, hide, or minimize her lush figure, this dress was engineered to celebrate it. The fabric was heavy and rich, cut to perfectly hug the generous slope of her hips and support the heavy swell of her chest. Tucked into the neckline was a thick, cream-colored cardstock envelope. She opened it with shaking fingers. The handwriting was sharp, elegant, and uncompromising. A queen should never wear colors meant to blend in. Wear red tonight. My driver will collect you at 8. Number Dissig. Number Dis Essen. The quiet Menning room at the top of the Drake Hotel offered a sweeping, panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, but Matteo Vitiello wasn't looking at the city. He was looking at Chloe. When she had stepped out of the private elevator, wearing the ruby velvet gown, the air had physically left Matteo's lungs. The dress clung to her every soft, magnificent curve, accentuating the lushness that her fool of an ex had tried to shame her for. She looked powerful, sensual, and utterly breathtaking. "You look." Matteo stood, stepping forward to take her hand, pressing a warm kiss to her knuckles. "Words fail me, Mia Bella. You are a masterpiece." Chloe felt a deep blush creep up her neck, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. It was from pure, unadulterated desire. "Thank you. And thank you for everything. I saw the news today." Matteo guided her to the table, pulling out her chair. "I told you I handle pests. He will no longer be a concern to you." They spent the next 2 hours dining on imported truffles, rich pastas, and wine that tasted like liquid gold. For a man who controlled the city's underworld, Matteo was incredibly attentive. He asked about her work, her passions, and her dreams, listening to her with an intensity that made her feel like she was the only woman on the planet. He never once looked at her body with anything less than absolute worship. As the dessert plates were cleared, a sudden commotion erupted near the entrance of the private suite. The heavy mahogany doors flew open, and 2 of Matteo's massive bodyguards dragged a thrashing, disheveled figure into the room. It was Bradley. His designer suit was torn, his eye was bruised, and he looked completely manic. "Mr. Vitiello, we caught him trying to bribe a service elevator operator," the head guard grunted, tossing Bradley onto the plush carpet. Bradley scrambled to his knees, his eyes darting frantically between Matteo and Chloe. When he looked at Chloe, his jaw dropped. In the ruby dress, standing tall beside the most powerful man in the city, she looked like royalty. She didn't look like the woman he had bullied. She looked like a goddess who could end his life with a single word. "Chloe. Chloe, please," Bradley begged, his voice cracking hysterically. "You have to tell him to stop. The O'Connors are outside my building." They're going to kill me. Tell him to give my money back." Chloe looked down at the pathetic, trembling man on the floor. For 3 years she had let this man dictate her worth. She had starved herself, cried herself to sleep, and hated her own reflection because of his shallow, vicious cruelty. Now, looking at him, she felt absolutely nothing but pity. "Why should I help you, Bradley?" Chloe asked, her voice calm and remarkably steady. "You made it very clear last night that I am just a fat embarrassment." "I was stupid." Bradley wept, crawling slightly forward before a bodyguard stepped on his shoulder, pinning him to the floor. "I was insecure. You were always too good for me. I just wanted to bring you down so you wouldn't leave." "Please, Chloe, you're a good person. Save me." Mateo's expression turned utterly lethal. He slowly stood from the table, walking around to stand directly in front of Bradley. "You do not get to speak to her," Mateo said softly, the quiet volume echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. "You do not get to look at her, and you certainly do not get to beg for her mercy." "Please, BTLO, I'll do anything." "I don't want anything from you," Mateo interrupted. He looked down at Bradley like one looks at dog waste on a pristine shoe. "You had a diamond in your hands, and you treated it like dirt because you were too weak to hold its weight. Now you belong to the wolves." Mateo snapped his fingers. "Take him down to the service alley. The O'Connor brothers are waiting by the loading dock. Tell them his debt is theirs to collect." "No. No, please. Chloe." Bradley screamed as the guards hauled him up by his armpits and dragged him backward out of the room. His terrifying screams echoed down the hallway until the heavy mahogany doors slammed shut, plunging the dining room back into quiet luxury. Chloe stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The reality of Mateo's world was dark, violent, and absolute. Mateo turned to her, the lethal coldness vanishing from his eyes, instantly replaced by a burning, possessive heat. He closed the distance between them, his large hands coming up to gently cup her face. His thumbs brushed against her cheekbones. "Are you afraid of me, Chloe?" he asked, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. Chloe looked up into his dark eyes. She thought about the cruelty she had endured her entire life, the constant pressure to shrink herself to fit into a world that didn't want her. Here was a man who didn't want her to shrink, but he wanted her to take up space. He wanted to set the world on fire just to keep her warm. "No," Chloe whispered, her hands coming up to rest flat against the solid, muscular expanse of his chest. "I'm not afraid." Mateo let out a harsh, relieved breath. He leaned down, his lips brushing softly against hers in a promise of absolute devotion. "Good, because from this night forward, no one will ever disrespect you again. You are my queen, and anyone who makes you feel like you are anything less than perfect will face the fire." He kissed her deeply, sweeping her up into his arms, entirely consumed by the lush, beautiful woman who had finally claimed the heart of Chicago's most ruthless king. Bradley's downfall was as brutal as his insults, proving that true karma is delivered in a bespoke charcoal suit. Do you think Bradley got exactly what he deserved from the ruthless Mafia boss and the O'Connor syndicate? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. If you loved seeing Chloe rise as a powerful, beautiful queen, please hit that like button, share this dramatic story, and subscribe for more thrilling content.